So, Google has graced us with yet another amazing visionary individual who is actually the chief evangelist and brand marketing head at Google. It's Gopi Kallayil, and he actually believes that the most important technology we use in our lives is right here: our body, our breath, and our brain. He basically has got decades of yoga and meditation practice in his back pocket, and that led him to integrate what it is that he's going to talk to us about today, which is the inner and outer technologies. He's the author of an awesome book called The Internet to the Inner Net: 5 Ways to Reset Your Connection to Live a Conscious Life. He's also a triathlete, a Burning Man devotee, a global traveler, and a speaker. Give it up for Gopi on the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, all you shiny, happy people of the Happiness Summit, do me a favor. On a count of 3, will you put your hands up, jump out of your chair, and scream, happy? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Happy! Okay, one more time. I really want you to hear it roar. This is Miami. 1, 2, 3. Happy! Beautiful, have a seat. That makes me happy. Thank you, ma'am. I want to start with a small question. How many organs are there in your body right now? Many. But how many? All of your coaches, you're into mind, body, spirit. How many organs are there in your body? Guess? I heard 42 here. Said 200. Somebody said 50. It's amazing we don't know. We use our body every single day of our life, and we are not even sure. I didn't know the answer, so I asked 3 doctor friends of mine, and they were not sure either. They said, well, it all depends on what you call organs. So I asked my most trusted source, Miss Google. Miss Google told me there are 78 organs in the human body. So today I'm going to introduce you to the 79th organ, not created by nature or by God, depending on your belief systems, but created entirely by human beings. This has become the 79th organ in our body. The first one. I know you're laughing nervously, but in many ways it is starting to behave like a human organ. It has a skin. You touch it, it responds. It's got eyes. It recognizes people, faces, objects. It's got ears because you speak to it, it understands you. It's got a voice. It talks back to you. And it seems to have an amazing level of intelligence that sometimes exceeds a lot of what we are capable of. Here's a small demo. Let me see if this will work. Okay, Google. What is Picasso's full name?
Pablo Picasso's full name is Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Paula Juan Nepomuceno Maria de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz y Picasso.
Right? It remembered all the 20 names. Thank you. That was part of his name. But more than that, it seems to have a mind, spirit, consciousness. Otherwise, why else would you sleep with it next to your bedside? How many of you do that? Keep this so close to our heart. And most importantly, the one thing I noticed at the World Happiness Summit as I was walking around the garden area is so many of you were spending your free time with your 79th organ lost deeply in prayer. But all jokes apart, on October 7th, 2014, we hit a unique inflection point in human history. On that day, it was estimated that in a planet with 7.1 billion human beings, there are now 7.2 billion mobile devices. And since then, towards 2017, obviously the number has grown. So for the first time in human history, we have a piece of technology that exceeds the number of human beings. That means more pieces have access to one of this than have access to clean drinking water and electricity. But the question is this making us any happier? The question it is begging is, what is our relationship? Because we can't roll back from this point. What is the relationship going to be between this technology that makes our life so useful that it's become a remote control to the world? You click on it, and 2 minutes later, a car shows up at your door. You click on it again, and somebody drops milk off at your door. So what is our relationship going to be with these kind of technologies in terms of our own humanity, in terms of our own happiness? Now, these technologies give us a lot of benefits, not just the two I mentioned, and I want to share with you a personal story of the kind of benefits I witnessed in my own personal life history. I know Ismail Kala, when he spoke yesterday, said, don't be afraid to speak in public about your own family history, because that is who you are. And so if you'll indulge me, I want to take you on a small journey to tell you first about all of the benefits I'm seeing for sure. And for that, I want to take you to this tiny rice farming village in southern India in a state called Kerala, called Chittilancheri. This rice farming village of 20,000 people is a place with a very special place in my heart, because this is where my family roots go back to. This is where my grandparents lived as poor rice farmers, cultivating a patch of land not much bigger than this property. And this is where my parents grew up as the children of poor rice farmers with a very modest life. They didn't have electricity growing up. They didn't have running water. They don't have a college education. The only education they had access to was 10 years of schooling in the rural Indian village school. But they had aspirations for their children, much like any of you might have aspirations for children, those of you who have children. And thanks to those aspirations, their kids, that is me and my 3 siblings, went on to get 10 college degrees, including 2 from US Ivy League business schools, even though my parents had never set foot in America. And the question is often asked, what caused that kind of social mobility in one generation? It is very simply access to information, access to education. But it is very slow access. And today when I go back to the village and look at the village school where my mother studied, and as I do every year to go visit family and relatives, the school looks pretty much the same in terms of infrastructure. But what has changed is, and this is a story that's unfolding all over the world, is that kids with access to computers and the kind of technologies we're building at Google now have access to the same amount of information as all of you here have sitting in Miami. In an era where information is like oxygen, we are leveling the playing field for humanity. Thank you. So no doubt about it, the benefits are enormous. But in the midst of all of this, even as all of these technologies take over our life, the one point we shouldn't forget is the most important technology that is accessible to every single human being on this planet is what? It's the most complex, sophisticated technology that we know as humankind. Our brain, exactly. It's our brain, our breath, our consciousness. Right here, our inner technology. This is the technology we get to use. And our pathway to happiness is defined by how we maintain, monitor, use this technology. And why is this technology so important? Because everything we experience in our life, whether the food we ate this morning, or if you're trying to process this talk, or a piece of music you listen to, has to be processed by this technology. Plus, our self-expression, the books you write, the music you'll create, the dish you'll make, the garment you design and stitch, the painting you paint, are all outputs of this technology. So the quality of our life, the quality of our happiness is driven by the quality of this inner technology. And Mo presented it beautifully in the form of an equation. But that is putting us in this terrible paradoxical situation because of all of these outer technologies that we have access to us. Now, I know some of you are looking at me a little suspiciously and said, should I trust this Gopi guy? He's the Google guy. He spends his day creating weapons of mass distraction. And now he's singing this tune. But in all seriousness, these technologies, highly useful, but they demand so much of us. They keep us constantly fed with all of the stimulus that is coming towards us. They want us to respond, always be on, and therefore our attention is getting fragmented. We're feeling overwhelmed, overworked, over-seduced, hyper stimulated. But in the midst of all of this, this technology, to be in a state of peak performance, to be in a happy state, needs its moments of quiet, needs its moments of withdrawal. So many speakers, day after day, in the last 3 days have been coming and talking about it, about mindfulness, creating spaciousness, going out into the nature. So that is the dichotomy we are struggling with. How do we use this highly useful technologies, not overwhelm us, and yet give enough spaciousness for this inner technology to be in a state of peak performance, in a state of happiness? This was my struggle. And I asked the question, and I realized it is not the fault of this technology. We're all prone to blaming it, but these are inner technologies. They don't do anything. They're just sitting there being useful. It is our relationship to these technologies that is the cause of the problem. So we have to take personal responsibility on how we define our relationship. This was the central question I posed myself, especially because I had chosen to work in Silicon Valley, which means I'd walked into the lion's den. I was poking the lion in the eye. I was raising my hand and say, send me 500 emails every single day. Make my entire work about working with these technologies. So over time, by conducting some experiments in my own life, I realized that what worked best for me was tiny daily rituals I could incorporate into my life. Because fortunately for me, fortunately for all of us, the operating manual for this technology, of course, is available on the internet. The operating manual for this technology is also available to us. We don't have to figure it out. Over 2,000 years, human beings have developed various traditions in various cultures, all the wisdom traditions, many of which we saw here, whether it's yoga, meditation, mindfulness, nutrition, sleep. The technologies to manage, or the operating manual for this technology is well documented and available to us for free from around the world. The question is, how do we then take it and incorporate it? So I started running these tiny experiments and incorporating, and what worked best for me is tiny daily rituals. So I'm going to share with you 3 from the book I wrote in the time that I have now, and if I have more time, I'll do about 5. The tiny daily rituals that work for me. The first one is this concept of focus on the essential. And what I mean by this comes from what the German philosopher Goethe said: things that are more important should not be at the mercy of things that are less important. And by focusing on the essential, and various speakers talked about setting intentions, setting your priorities, you are clear about what is truly important in your life. How many do you need? Start with 1, maybe 3. I have lived 14 years now with 5. And how did I arrive at the 5? I was doing a startup company in Silicon Valley, which is a very stressful time as an entrepreneur. And one weekend, when I couldn't take it anymore, I decided to give myself a break and went and stayed in a Benedictine monastery on the Big Sur coast called the New Camaldoli Hermitage, with a brilliant URL. This is a hermitage run by 9 reclusive monks who make a little bit of income by providing personal retreat space in cottages overlooking the beautiful Pacific Ocean. And the URL is www.contemplation.com. And how these reclusive monks snagged this highly desirable URL through domain squatting is a mystery to me. In any case, I was in this monastery, and they encourage you to maintain the entire time in silence, hold the space in meditation and contemplation. And it struck me that my company has a business plan, and I have no business plan for my life. I was just lurching from one demand on my time to another. And I said, this is ridiculous. So I spent the entire weekend writing what I call the business plan for my life. And I wanted it to fit on one sheet of paper. I said, my life, our life should not be so complicated, I need 200 pages. I should be able to get it on one sheet of paper. But I was not satisfied with that. I said I wanted to reduce it to a few words, so I distilled it down to 5 words, which I carry with me on my fingertips, figuratively speaking, so that any point in time, while all these distractions may come from this technology, I always default back to these 5 essentials. So that gives me sort of a governor, something to center myself on. So one of the rituals I'm going to ask you to do as you head home today is to ask yourself, what are your 1 or 3 or 5 most important essentials in your own life? Because that gives you clarity. The second is this fairly basic advice: do one thing at a time. Again, many speakers touched upon it. This is nothing sophisticated, I'm telling you. Our grandparents told us this, our parents would tell us this. But the reason it bears repeating and why I had to consciously choose it as a ritual is I noticed the way I was leading my life. I would walk into a meeting at Google, somebody would be presenting, and while they're presenting, I would have my laptop open, and I would be answering an email while having 3 chat windows while simultaneously inhaling my lunch. Does this sound familiar? And at the end of the presentation, if you ask me what was discussed, I may remember 1 or 2 points. Most of the discussion I was lost on me. I couldn't tell you the taste of the food I ate because I was not paying attention, and I would have sent an embarrassing chat message in the wrong window. She did forgive me. So this notion of doing one thing at a time. Now, when I'm at these conferences, I always get a pushback when people come up to me and say, no, we have changed as a society, as a civilization. We are perfectly capable, our kids are capable of doing the homework while watching a YouTube video, while being on Instagram. And I asked them this question: if you truly believe this, then let me ask you a question. If you had to get open heart surgery, and if your surgeon told you, I am good at multitasking, I also like baseball and the stock market, so in the operating theater, while I'm working on you, there'll be a couple of screens open, would we say yes to it? No. Because this technology is extremely good when it has to work on one thing, and it actually puts you in a state of joy, happiness, when you can build all your attention, and it completely falls apart when you make it do 6 things at the same time. So why inflict suffering on yourself? The third ritual that I want to talk about is this notion of at least commit to 1 minute of nurturing your inner technology every day. 1 minute. Whatever it may be. And you make your choices from the wisdom traditions. It could be reading poetry, it could be gardening, it could be taking a walk down the lake next to your house, whatever it be. For me, it is yoga and meditation. I was fortunate that at the age of 19, because of winning the ovarian lottery, which means I was born into the Indian culture, I found my spiritual teacher, my guru, Ramadevi, and she taught me how to meditate, and it became my path, and I became a yoga teacher. I ran away to an ashram and became a yoga teacher at an early age. And at that time, when I was in the ashram, there's a routine that you follow. The system made you do it. Every day, 5:30 in the morning, I would wake up. We'd all wake up, sit for meditation at 6. 6:30, you would start chanting kirtan. At 7, there would be a lecture on some scripture. And at 8 o'clock, you did 2 hours of asana pranayama. You do this 7 days a week. You do it month after month. And when you do something so consistently, your body gets trained into go to the state of complete peace, quiet, joy. So when I was leaving the ashram, I made a commitment to myself that I am going to do at least 1 hour of yoga and 30 minutes of meditation every single day, because I'd seen the power of what it could do in my life. And I went back to college, and this commitment that I made, I was able to hold on to it for 3 days. Because back in college, along with my friends in my dorm room, now I was more engrossed in not at waking up at 5:30, but staying up till 4 in the morning, listening to Pink Floyd and The Who, and indulging in semi-illicit activities. So as an adult, I struggled. As a young adult, I came to Google, and I was still struggling. On some days, I was able to do it. Most days, I was not. I had this sense of failure, this lack of integrity towards my own commitment. And one day, I went up to a colleague of mine. His name is Meng. He's famous for creating a meditation program at Google called Search Inside Yourself. And it's a book by that name. It's now a big movement, actually, Search Inside Yourself. So I go to Meng and said, Meng, I'm struggling with this. What do you advise? I'm not able to hold on to my practice. And Meng, with his infinite wisdom, looked at me and said, Gopi, let me tell you something. Why don't you start with 1 breath? Because even if you're trying to meditate for 1 hour, it's 600 breaths strung together. You have to start with the first one and then go on to the next one. and see if we can do one breath every day. And since I'm a compulsive neurotic overachiever, I said, I can do better than that. I'll do a whole minute. And that was my commitment. This might seem silly, but something changed profoundly in my living habits when I made that commitment. Because how many minutes are there in a day? This important resource called time we all use. Any idea? 1,440. Somebody shouted from the back. So my argument was that of the 1,440, there's at least 1 minute that I can actually give to myself. If I can, what is the point in living? So now, every single day I was able to do 1 minute of yoga, which is about 2 sun salutations, and 1 minute of meditation, which is about 6 to 8 breaths. But the magical thing was, a week went by, 2 weeks went by, and for the first time in my life, I could look back and say with integrity that I actually followed my practice, followed my commitment. But something else happened magically that I was not prepared to. And that was, on many of these days, a minute would go by, and it was time to finish up the practice, but mind would say, this is so sweet, this is so grounding. What else is out there that you're running off to that is more important than this? So I would sit for a 2nd minute, a 5th minute, an 8th minute, and before long, a 20-minute meditation or a 30-minute yoga practice had become easy. So my ask you, the ritual I'm asking you to adopt is find whatever be your practice to move this inner technology into a state of peak performance and joy and happiness. Commit to the lowest possible threshold that you cannot say no to every single day. If it's 1 breath, start with 1 breath. If it's a minute, find the lowest possible threshold. So that is the 3rd ritual. And with that, I'm going to wrap up since we are in a... You have to... Suzanne, they want me to keep going. 1 minute? Okay. I'll tell you one more ritual. And the next 4th ritual, the rest, people buy the book. It's all in there. It's also a longer TEDx talk by the same title, so go watch my TEDx talk. The entire speech is there. The 4th ritual is to make appointments for connecting with the internet. What I noticed, again, what I was struggling with, my calendar, how many hours are there in a week, by the way? 148, right? 58. 168 hours, yeah. 168 hours in a week. And when I noticed the week, much of my calendar was being hijacked by someone else, because one of the benefits and the curses of this technology is in a company with 63,000 employees, everybody can see my calendar electronically. So they grab time on it, they book meetings on it, and every day my day was getting hijacked by someone else. It feels like you're out of control. But if something was on the calendar, I was bound to do it. I would show up for meetings because it's on my calendar. And I said, if I'm a slave of my calendar, one way to become master of my calendar is to book my own appointments for myself. So I started doing that. And the thing that worked, the ritual that works best for me is standing appointments that are non-negotiable. Same day of the week, same hour. And start with 1. Start with 1. So I started with my first one, which is Monday, 5:30. I would drop everything, go off into the park next to the Google campus, and teach yoga to the yoga practicing Googlers, whom we call yoglers. So almost 11 years ago, I started my first Monday 5:30 p.m. yoga class for the yoglers. And 10.5 years later, I have not missed a single class. Because that is my non-negotiable commitment. I will hold on to it. Unless I'm traveling and physically not there, I make sure that somebody else subs for me, so the class is still available for the community. We haven't missed a single class. And I teach where I go. So I've taught in the Buenos Aires office, or in the Tokyo office, or in the Beijing office. So find one thing where you want to put in a slightly more substantial commitment, half an hour, 1 hour, 1 hour ideally. Make it the same day of the week, the same hour, and repeat it. Tell everyone you know at work, in your family, that this is non-negotiable. But the most important thing is go back and do it consistently, and it becomes a ritual and a habit. With that, I want to close this off in the interest of time. And the point I want to make is I'm not asking you to adopt these rituals. If you want, you can. The more important point I want you to walk away with is a simple idea that this technology is useful, But this is the most important technology everybody gets to use. The quality of your life. Thank you. The quality of our life, the quality of our happiness is determined by how you manage this inner technology in a state of peak performance and joy. And for that, as you leave the conference, I want you to ask the singular question. While we are still establishing our new relationship with these technologies, how are we going to redefine our pre-existing relationship with this technology using all of the wisdom that is available from wisdom traditions? And my answer to that is build tiny daily rituals. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.